In this lecture, we're going to continue exploring Chapter 10, which is titled Work and Wealth. And in particular, we're going to work our way through Section 10.3 and Section 10.4. Section 10.3 is titled Workplace Changes, and experts debate whether or not information technology has resulted in a net reduction in available jobs, as we have seen, but there is no dispute that information technology has affected how people work. So in this section, we're going to survey a few of the ways that information technology is fundamentally changing the work experience. So let's start off with some organizational changes. Information technology has influenced the way manufacturing and service companies organize themselves. A typical early use of computers was to automate a back office function, such as payroll, and using computers in this way required a company to make no changes in its organization. But later, companies began using computers inside manufacturing units. Computers enabled companies to customize products and provide better service to their customers. And this use of computers delegated more responsibility to the line workers, and it encouraged a decentralization of sales and support functions, which reduced a company's bureaucracy. Information technology within corporations reached a third stage with the creation of computer networks linking different parts of the business. For example, integrating cash registers with inventory systems has allowed companies to order replacements automatically. And the overall effect of the introduction of information technology is to flatten organizational structures. And when the primary source of information distribution was the hand-typed, carbon-copied memorandum, most information flow followed the lines in organizational charts, such as in organizational chart A on the slide. But today, a wide variety of technologies allow any member of an organization to contact any other member with minimal effort and cost, such as in the organizational chart B on the slide. So as a result, new opportunities have arisen. For example, many companies assemble tiger teams of expert workers drawn from various parts of the organizational chart, where a tiger team will work together for a short period of time to solve an urgent problem, and then they disband. And flexible information flow also allows companies to adopt just-in-time production and distribution methods, which reduces inventory costs. Information technology also streamlines organizations by eliminating transactional middlemen. So, for example, you can consider the automation of the supply chain. Suppose company A buys widgets from company B. Now, in the past, someone at company A would have to have called someone at company B to order the widgets, but today many companies have adopted supply chain automation, and a computer at company A will be linked to a computer at company B, and then the computers are responsible for ordering the widgets, eliminating the need for employees to handle the orders. Now, automating the paperwork activities associated with purchasing supplies can also reduce the number of people who produce purchase orders and invoices, pay bills, process checks, and so on. And the likely effect of information technology on organizations will be an increased demand in sub-job categories such as software engineers applications, computer support workers, software engineers and systems, network administrators, and network systems analysts, while the demand in other categories will drop, such as the demand for butchers, secretaries and stenographers, payroll clerks, bank tellers, and file clerks. Other careers that will be in higher demand will be things like desktop publishers, database administrators, personal and home care aides, computer systems analysts, and medical assistants. And then the other careers or jobs in lower demand will be cashiers, typists, pharmacists, bookkeepers, and postal clerks. Another workplace change brought about through information technology is the rise of telework. So telework, which is also called telecommuting, refers to an arrangement where employees spend a significant portion of their workday at a distance from the employer or a traditional place of work. And according to the Consumer Electronics Association, 37% of workers in the United States telework at least one day a month. And one kind of telework is working out of a home office. Another example of telework is someone who commutes to a telecenter rather than the company's site. And telecenters provide employees from different firms the ability to connect to their company's computers. A third example of telework are salespersons who have no offices. Instead, they transact all of their business from various locations using cell phones and laptop computers. So there are several advantages of telework, and this should be somewhat obvious given the rapid growth in the number of teleworkers, especially since the pandemic. So here are some of the most frequently cited advantages of telework. Number one, telework increases productivity. A variety of studies have shown teleworkers have 10 to 43% greater productivity than on-site workers. Number two, telework reduces absenteeism. Teleworkers are less likely to miss work than someone coming into the office. Three, telework improves morale. Employees who are teleworking have more freedom, and so it's easier for them to schedule their work around their personal schedules. If they are working at home, and they can dress more casually as well. Fourth, a company can recruit and retain more top employees. So, for example, a company that allows telework can recruit employees who otherwise would not be interested in the job because they are unable or unwilling to be within commuting distance of the main office. So telework allows companies to retain other employees who would have quit otherwise, such as mothers of young children. Number five, the fifth advantage is telework saves overhead. So with some of its workers away from the office, a company doesn't have to invest as much of its resources in office space. The sixth advantage is that telework improves the resilience of a company. So because not all the employees are in one place, the company is less likely to be harmed by a natural disaster or a terrorist attack. And seventh, telework is good for the environment because teleworkers do not take part in the typical daily commute, which will save energy and reduce pollution. And then eighth, employees may save money by telework. So they may not have to purchase as much business attire, and they may be able to avoid paying childcare expenses. And there are some disadvantages of telework, and here are some of the most frequently cited disadvantages given by companies who tend to discourage or prohibit telework. So first off, is telework threatens the authority and control of managers. So when employees work at a distance from their managers, they naturally have more autonomy. So how can a manager manage an employee who is not around? So that's a problem. Second disadvantage is telework makes it impossible for an employee to have face-to-face interactions with customers at the company site. And for some jobs, these sorts of interactions may be crucial, meaning the job simply cannot be done from a distance. And third, sensitive information is less secure. So if a person has valuable physical or electronic files at home or in an automobile, they may be far less secure than they would have been if they were kept at the office. And so there's a greater chance that the information will be lost or compromised through a fire or theft. A fourth disadvantage has to do with when people in an organization do not keep the same hours or come into the office every day. It's more difficult to schedule team meetings. Even if employees are only teleworking 1 or 2 days a week, many others in the organization can suffer significant inconvenience. And fifth, teleworkers are less visible, so there's a danger that teleworkers will be forgotten when it's time for raises or promotions. When somebody is never around, so to speak, others can get the idea that the teleworker is not making a contribution to the organization. When faced with a problem or a need for information, employees at the office are less likely to contact a teleworker than someone else who is there in person with them. Meanwhile, many teleworkers are afraid to leave their telephones even for a short time, worried that if someone from work calls them and they are not around, they will get the reputation for not being at work, so to speak. Seventh is a potential disadvantage, depending on your personality, is teleworkers are isolated. So some jobs require people to bounce ideas off coworkers, and what are people working at home supposed to do? Eighth, often cited disadvantage is that teleworkers end up working longer hours for the same pay. So when everything a person needs to do her job is right there at home, she's more likely to keep coming back to it. And how does someone leave her work at the office when her home is her office? And critics of telework are quick to say that overwork is actually the reason why teleworkers exhibit higher productivity. And so that's probably the most serious potential disadvantage of telework. The modern business environment is highly competitive and rapidly fluctuating, and as a result, the level of commitment companies are willing to make to their employees is dropping. Some companies once boasted that they took care of their employees and did not engage in layoffs during business downturns, but those days are long gone. The dot-com bust led to massive layoffs in the information technology industry, and many large institutions are giving themselves more flexibility and saving money on benefits by hiring subcontractors and temporary employees. So, for example, in the past 2 decades, colleges and universities have greatly increased the number of contingent faculty members with fixed term contracts relative to the number of faculty holding indefinite tenure. Contingent faculty members earn less than tenure track faculty members as well, and giving faculty members fixed term contracts makes it easier for colleges and universities to match faculty resources with student demand for classes, thereby improving efficiency. Some startup companies have taken this idea to the extreme. So instead of hiring employees, they make money by connecting people who want a service with people willing to provide that service. And this sort of arrangement is called the gig economy. And the gig economy refers to service workers who make a living by completing these types of short-term jobs for clients. And these workers do not have a traditional employer, but typically rely upon one or more companies to connect them with clients. Examples include Uber, Lyft, Instacart, and Airbnb. Uber and Lyft connect riders and drivers. Instacart is a grocery delivery service, and Airbnb connects people who need a place to stay with people who have accommodations for rent. Proponents of the gig economy say it provides workers with independence and flexibility. Workers can make their own schedules and decide which assignments they want to accept. But critics say that people only take these jobs because they can't find stable employment. And they point out that companies pit workers against each other in an effort to keep prices down. And that's good for the people purchasing the services, but bad for the people providing the services. For example, Lyft and Uber engaged in a price war that resulted in significant reductions in the fares drivers earned. According to the political economist Robert Reich, the big money goes to the corporations that own the software, and the scraps go to the on-demand workers. He says Uber drivers use their own cars, take out their own insurance, work as many hours as they want or can, and pay Uber a fat percentage. Worker safety, social security, Uber says it's not the employer, so it's not responsible. Amazon's mechanical Turks work for pennies, literally. Minimum wage, time and a half for overtime. Amazon says it just connects buyers and sellers, so it's not responsible. So are gig workers employees or independent contractors? And the answer is not clear because in some respects gig workers are more like employees, while in other respects they are more like independent contractors. Some workers have concluded they would be better off as employees. Uber and Lyft drivers had filed lawsuits to be classified as employees rather than independent contractors. If their lawsuit is successful, drivers could be entitled to an hourly wage and reimbursement for work-related expenses such as gas and car insurance. Information technology has given companies many new tools to monitor the activities of their employees. An American Management Association e-Policy Institute survey in 2007 revealed that 66% of employers were monitoring the internet use of their employees. That's 66%. Other examples of employee monitoring by American employers included video surveillance at 48%, monitoring keyboard activity at 45%, monitoring time spent on the phone at 45%, and monitoring emails 43%. The principal purpose of monitoring is to identify inappropriate use of company resources. A quarter of companies in the United Kingdom have fired employees for improper use of the internet. And in the majority of these cases, the employee was surfing the web for pornography. That's the majority of the cases. Another study of employee emails concluded that eliminating email containing gossip and jokes would cut the time staff spend reading email by 30%. A study conducted by International Data Corporation concluded that between 30 and 40% of internet use by employees was not work-related. So monitoring can help detect illegal activities of employees as well. For example, by monitoring instant messaging conversations, employers have caught employees who had performed various misdeeds, including an employee who hacked into a company computer after being denied a promotion. Many companies use monitoring to gauge the productivity of their workers. For example, telemarketing firms keep track of how many calls their employees make per hour. And sometimes monitoring can help an organization assess the quality of the work done by its employees. And more schools, for example, are using video cameras to increase security. And it's an open question whether monitoring is ultimately beneficial to an organization. Obviously, on the one hand, organizations institute monitoring because they have reason to believe it will improve the quantity or quality of the work performed by their employees. But while there is evidence that employee monitoring makes employees more focused on their tasks, it also reduces job satisfaction. Say something about multinational teams. So in the 1980s, General Electric and Citibank set up software development teams in India. And since then, many corporations have established field offices in India, including Analog Devices, Cadence Design Systems, Cisco, Intel, Microsoft, and Sun Microsystems. Bangalore, in particular, has made an effort to become the Silicon Valley of India. Western-based companies use Indian companies to write software, process credit card applications, and do billing. Texas Instruments chip design team in Bangalore has 200 patents to its name, and Hewlett-Packard and Oracle both have thousands of employees in India. The SAP has 500 engineers in Bangalore. Multinational teams allow a company to have people that work more hours during the day. And so it becomes easier to have a call support center open 24 hours a day. And it is even possible for projects to be shuttled between multiple sites, which allows around the clock progress to be made on time sensitive products. For example, a team in Palo Alto, California can spend its day finding bugs in a piece of software and then hand the bug reports over to a team in Bangalore that spends its day fixing the bugs. And the main attraction, perhaps though, of having a multinational team where part of that team is in India, for example, is the cost savings. Wages in India are substantially lower than in the United States or Western Europe. For example, the total cost of an Indian computer programmer is about $6,000 to $9,000 a year. Companies say they need to lower their expenses in order to stay in business, and if they go out of business, their US employees will lose their jobs. So creating multinational teams is a way for companies to stay in business and preserve jobs in the United States. Creating multinational teams has disadvantages as well. The principal disadvantage is that the infrastructure in less developed countries makes conducting business more difficult. But despite the difficulties, corporations are increasingly making use of multinational teams. About 90,000 IT-related jobs in the United States are moving to foreign countries every year, and at American companies whose revenues are at least $5 billion, about a quarter of IT jobs have already moved offshore. And so this contributes as well to the effect where the few at the top of the earning pay scale in the United States are just going to become even richer compared to the rest of us. All right, section 10.4 is titled Globalization. Globalization refers to the process of creating a worldwide network of businesses and markets. Globalization results in greater mobility of goods, services, and capital around the world, and investments are made across national borders. Products manufactured in one country can be sold in another, and consumers calling a telephone help center can get connected with support technicians located on the other side of the world. This figure here, or this graph, shows the rapidly decreasing cost of information technology that made globalization possible. You can see that the cost of computing dropped by 99.99% between 1975 and 1995, and the cost of an international telephone call from New York to London dropped by 99% between 1930 and 1996. And companies made extensive use of low-cost information technology to coordinate operations distributed around the planet. And let's look at some arguments in favor of globalization. And so those who tend to favor globalization seek the removal of trade barriers between nations. The North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, among Canada, the United States, and Mexico was a step toward globalization. And the World Trade Organization, the WTO, is an international body that devises rules for international trade and promotes the goal of free trade among nations. The WTO and other proponents of globalization support free trade with arguments such as these. First, free trade can increase everyone's standard of living. So the idea here is that every country has a comparative advantage at producing certain products and services, meaning it can produce them at a lower opportunity cost than any other country. And so consumers get better prices when each area produces the goods or services it does best. And this would be things like corn in Kansas, automobiles in Ontario, Canada, semiconductors in Singapore, and so on. And then these products and services are bought and sold without trade barriers. And when prices are lower, the real purchasing power of consumers is higher. And so globalization increases everyone's standard of living in that way. The second argument in favor of globalization is that people in poorer countries deserve jobs too. And so when they gain employment, their prosperity increases. Third, every example in the past century of a poor country becoming more prosperous has been the result of that country producing goods for the world market rather than striving for self sufficiency. So, contrast the remarkable success story that is South Korea with the economic basket case that is North Korea. A fourth argument is that creating jobs around the world reduces unrest and leads to more stability. So, countries with interdependent economies are less likely to go to war with each other. Right, and there are some arguments against globalization. Ralph Nader, American trade unions, the European Farm Lobby, and organizations such as Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, and Oxfam oppose globalization, and they gave reasons such as the following for why globalization is a bad trend. Reason number one is that the United States and other governments should not be subordinate to the WTO. The WTO makes the rules for globalization, but nobody elected it, and it makes its decisions behind closed doors. So every member country, from the United States to the tiniest dictatorship, has one vote in the WTO. Second reason is that American workers should not be forced to compete with foreign workers who do not receive decent pay and working conditions. And then the WTO doesn't require member countries to protect the rights of their workers. It has not banned child labor, for example, and authoritarian regimes such as the People's Republic of China are allowed to participate in the WTO even though they do not let their workers organize into labor unions. The third reason against globalization is that globalization has accelerated the loss of both manufacturing jobs and white-collar jobs overseas. Fourth reason is that against globalization is the removal of trade barriers hurts workers in foreign countries too. For example, NAFTA removed tariffs among Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Because they received agricultural subsidies from the US government, large American agribusinesses grow corn and wheat for less than its true cost of production and sell the grain in Mexico. And then Mexican farmers who cannot compete with these prices are driven out of business. And then most of them cannot find jobs in Mexico and end up emigrating to the United States. Let's say something about the dot-com bust and its relationship to the increase in unemployment in the IT sector. So in the 1990s, Intel stock rose 3,900%. Microsoft stock increased in value 7,500%. And Cisco Systems' stock soared an incredible 66,000%. That means $1,000 of Cisco stock purchased in 1990 was worth $661,000 at the end of 1999. So investors looking for new opportunities for high returns focused on dot-coms, which are internet-related startup companies. And speculators pushed up the values of many companies that had never earned a profit. Early in 2000, the total valuation of 370 internet startups was $1.5 trillion, even though they had only $40 billion in sales. And that's just sales, not profits. In the early 2000s, the speculative bubble burst and the prices of dot-com stocks fell rapidly. The ensuing dot-com bust resulted in 862 high-tech startups going out of business between January of 2000 and June of 2002. Across the United States, the high-tech industry shed 500,000 jobs. In San Francisco and Silicon Valley, the dot-com bust resulted in the loss of 13% of non-agricultural jobs, the worst downturn since the Great Depression. And what about foreign workers in the US IT industry? So Even while hundreds of thousands of information technology workers were losing their jobs, US companies hired tens of thousands of foreign workers to work in the United States. And the US government grants these workers visas allowing them to work in America. And the two most common visas are called the H-1B and the L-1. An H-1B visa allows a foreigner to work in the United States for up to 6 years. And in order for a company to get an H-1B visa for a foreign employee, the company must demonstrate that there are no Americans qualified to do the job. The company must also pay the foreign worker the prevailing wage for the job. And information technology companies have made extensive use of H-1B visas to bring in skilled foreign workers and to hire foreign students graduating from US universities. In the midst of the high-tech downturn, the US government continued to issue tens of thousands of H-1B visas, 163,600 in 2000 to 2001, and 79,100 in 2001, from 2001 to 2002. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate among American computer science professionals was about 5.1%. So many of the 100,000 unemployed computer scientists complained to Congress about the large number of H-1B visas being issued, and some professional organizations argued against giving out any H-1B visas at all. And what Congress decided to do was drop the H-1B quota to 65,000 for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2003, and it initially set a quota of 65,000 for the following fiscal year. However, the 65,000 H-1B visas approved for from 2004 to 2005 were filled in a single day. Representatives of universities and technology companies said the quota was set too low. Bill Gates said, quote, anyone who's got the education and the experience, they're not out there unemployed, end quote. Congress responded in May of 2005 by allowing an exemption for an additional 20,000 foreigners with advanced degrees such as master's degrees or higher. And the annual quota of 65,000 H-1B visas and the exemption for 20,000 foreigners with advanced degrees remains in effect. When the economy is strong, the demand for H-1B visas greatly exceeds the number of visas available, and the federal government holds a lottery to determine which petitions will move forward. In April of 2018, the government announced for the 6th year in a row that it would hold a lottery for H-1B visas because in the first 5 days of accepting visas, it had already received more than 85,000 applications. The other important work visa is called the L1. American companies use L1 visas to move workers from overseas facilities to the United States for up to 7 years. So for example, Intel employees in Bangalore, India could be transferred to Hillsboro, Oregon if they held an L1 visa. Employees brought into the United States under an L1 visa do not need to be paid the prevailing wage, and that saves employers money, of course. But critics of the L1 visas claim lower paid foreign workers are replacing higher paid American workers within the walls of high-tech facilities located in the United States. And interestingly enough, the US Congress has put no limit, none, on the number of L1 visas that may be issued in any given year. But the number of foreigners working in the United States under L1 visas is much smaller than the number holding H-1B visas. And in 2017, about 78,000 foreigners were employed in the United States under the L1 visa program. Okay, and then we'll say something now about foreign competition. So the debate over the number of visas to grant foreign workers seeking employment in the United States should not mask another trend, namely the increasing capabilities of IT companies within developing nations, particularly China and India. So in 1990, China's computer hardware industry was virtually non-existent. and IBM agreed to sell its PC division to Chinese computer manufacturer Lenovo for $1.75 billion in 2004, making Lenovo the number 3 manufacturer of PCs in the world. That was the year China became the world's leading producer of personal computer hardware. And today, 90% of all personal computers, 90% of all personal computers are manufactured in China. India's outsourcing industry is large. Indian companies now employ more than 1 million people and have annual sales exceeding $60 billion. About 2/3 of these sales are in outsourcing IT work, such as designing, programming, and maintaining computer software. And the other third are in outsourcing business processes, such as call centers, medical transcription, and X-ray interpretation. And evidence of global competition comes from the Annual Association for Computing Machinery International Collegiate Programming Contest. This is basically a global contest that began in 1977, and at that time, only schools from North America and Europe competed, but today it is a truly international competition. And interestingly enough, no American team has placed first in this competition since Harvey Mudd College in 1997. So in the 5-year period from 2011 through 2015, only one of the 20 teams earning gold medals was from the United States.